after finding out that Amtron probably wasn't going to open their plant in Scotland, and I was working again for my mother, clerking at the dry cleaners and things like that, and helping with uh, making supper at home, and so honing my cooking skills somewhat. And that fall, down at Springfield, they were offering a night course in FCC rules and regulations. The FCC is the Federal Communications Commission, and to be able to work on CB radios legally, you it was required that you have a second class uh, FCC radio telephone license. To get that, you had to take a test. It was a very, very hard test, and this course was a prep course for that test, and it was one night a week. So I, working with my mom some and etc., I managed to come up with the money to take. It was only a 2-credit course, and it was $30 a credit, being a night course and stuff. There weren't any extra fees, so it was $60, and plus I had to go down there every week, which I did. And I had realized that I needed to know more, that I needed to do better. And so this was my first step back to school. I went to class every week. Every week what we did was we took tests that were similar to the FCC test. And they're pretty difficult tests, but, I studied very hard. Our book for it was this big, thick book called a Q&A manual, which had a bunch of questions and answers about the FCC exam and rules and laws and things like that. I actually basically memorized that book. I read it constantly, all the time, and also at the same time, I started working at that same on Wednesdays at the college radio station KSTI in Springfield. Little 10-watt radio station, and I used to always tell myself that I was nobody was probably actually listening, maybe a couple people here and there, but not really. And so it was kind of more just kind of playing the game of pretending to be on the radio. WKRP in Cincinnati was on TV at the time, and so I just kind of one of those things I had some interest in, and I enjoyed doing it. But I studied very hard for the test. And that next spring they offered, and I also took the follow-up class in the spring, and it seemed to be going decently. The FCC test was offered in Sioux Falls, as it was every 2 years, that spring in April. So I went to Sioux Falls to take the test, and I managed to get a 75 on the test, which is what is required to pass the test, was a 75%. And there's 100 questions, so I had to answer 75 correctly. And the person giving the test actually looked at it, and she counted up my number that I'd write and then counted it backwards to make sure that, in fact, I had exactly 75. So I had the exact number required to pass the test. Now, that maybe doesn't seem like a lot. It doesn't seem like much of a success, but it was. I have the same license that someone who got a 95 on the test got. But the other thing is this. Of the people who take that test at the time, in the class there was like 15 of us, and 3 of us passed. And some of them have taken it more than once already. So I was one of the few that actually passed the first time through. From that, that fall ended up taking 9 credits of communication electronics and continued to work at the radio station. But one of the things during the summer I did was I did take a class, and I also worked at the radio station. I was actually pretty much the only person that summer working at the station. There was someone else there for a while in the first part of the summer, but after that it was just me. And I had made a couple of tapes that we ran during the day, and then every evening for at least a couple hours in the afternoon and into the evening. Uh, I was live, and again, I played the little game where I was the only one there and stuff, and that seemed to do pretty well for me. And that fall, something had happened during the summer. The uh, manager and the assistant manager for the radio station both would be students, also president and vice president of the club that was associated with the radio station that actually were, and most of the people in the club worked at the radio station, either paid or not paid. I was not paid, but the teacher for the communications class was impressed by my stick-to-itiveness and tenacity to come every day and work, though I was not getting paid, and to just do it and keep it on the air and do all the logs and do everything like you were supposed to do. So he had me ask me to be the station manager, also because one of the things the station manager was supposed to have was a FCC license. And since the people who were going to be it had gone on to bigger and better things and weren't around, and there were only a few of us that had an actual license, I was made manager, and that was an interesting thing. In a lot of ways, I wasn't ready for it, but in a lot of ways, I was. And one of the things was, as a manager, you ended up having to cover shifts when nobody else could, and I did that, and I had proven that I could do that and would do that. I also worked on some other things and stuff, and at that point, I decided to go back to school. I managed to work with vocational rehab and started actually coming back. Then after that, I came back full time in electronics and started taking some other courses and the classes I would need eventually to graduate.